Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Azure Back to School session. I'm happy to be here and to present this session for you. And this is a next session on Azure Back to School series. And I'm going to basically dive into what are the latest updates in Azure Bicep 2024. But before doing that, I want to say big thank you to organizers of this great event, namely to Dwayne, also known as Captain Hyperscaler, and Derek Smith, his co-pilot. So you may also review all these sessions on the site that's provided by them. So if you navigate to Azure Back to School, you should be able to see all the site. And in this site, you should be able to go to the schedule and then see all the available schedules here and watch my episode as well. All right, back to our slide here. Uh, so without any ado, I want to say let's dive into our topic and look what are the newest things that were added to Azure Bicep. So this is a little bit information about myself. I'm a cloud architect and as well as the Microsoft Azure MVP, and I've been MCT for the last 17 plus years. I think I need to change the number here. I'm also very active Microsoft contributor in tech community. You may see me while presenting or mentoring uh, cloud lunch and learn sessions. We call them CLL. In addition to that, I'm also trying to catch the trend and see what's going on Twitter X, and I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and Microsoft certified regional lead. So if you have any passion to become an MCT or you are looking for the next steps to advance your trading skills, please feel free to reach out to me. And the one of the easiest ways, sorry, one of the easiest way that you can reach out to me is you can always, catch up with me on the Twitter, or you can also, come to the LinkedIn and we can connect here on the LinkedIn. Please put a message to get connected. This is me over here, and I'm here to help the community to grow. And my focus is mostly on Microsoft Azure and infrastructure as a code. So that said, I'm also running the blog, and I'm posting there from time to time, thecloudmarathoner.com. And the main idea here with this blog is, and founding this blog is that I want to make sure that it actually helps and shares the cloud and Microsoft Azure journey and the roadmap that will encourage the readers, newcomers, and new beginners to learn and practice cloud with automation tricks. And my blog do encourage everyone to share useful tips and beats and help the beginners to succeed. Again, I'm also part of this great community called Cloud Family Events. But I think it's enough about myself. So while you are going to watch this YouTube video, please, put in the comments a bit information about what you are looking for, what type of sessions would be interesting for you to learn, especially on the cloud infrastructure world and Azure Bicep Automation. Let's go ahead. In addition to being Microsoft certified trainer, there are also very good Bicep courses on LinkedIn. So if you have a LinkedIn subscription, please check these 3 courses. You may always start with Azure Bicep First Look, then move into the part 1, and then finalize your studies with part 2. They are mostly covering the things that you need to get started, but there are some more advanced topics that are going to develop over time because Azure Bicep as a language itself is getting more features and more extensions, meaning that there is always something to learn and catch up. But these 3 courses will give you a great boost to start your Azure Bicep learning. Next, let's look into what we are going to cover in this session. First of all, we'll start with a brief express introduction to Azure Bicep for all the learners who never heard about Azure Bicep or it is first time you are going to try it. Next, we are going to look at latest on Azure Bicep and what was added. Then we'll look into the next release of Azure Bicep, what to expect in near future, and then we are going to look into uh, what to expect in the near future, and finally we'll have a demo so that you can see some demo of these features while getting some information. Next, uh, of course, it's very important to know what is Azure Bicep. And as you know, Azure Bicep itself is a DSL. It's a domain-specific language that transpiles into ARM templates. Its purpose is simple. Its purpose is to create an easy and intuitive language to author Azure infrastructure as a code. And as we mentioned, the purpose of Azure Bicep is to simplify the resource creation and management experience with a cleaner and more code reuse. With this new language, you can aim to make your infrastructure as a code development much easier for as a developer or DevOps engineer, so that you can, if you use typical way of creating your Azure resources using ARM template, now by switching to Azure Bicep, you can have much more infrastructure as a code oriented syntax and plus easier way to understand and manage your Azure resources. So let's look at the relationship between Azure Bicep and ARM. ARM here stands for Azure Resource Manager. And here's the graph that you see. On the left side here, we have Azure Bicep as a file that you generate. And then on the right side, you have other templating infrastructure as a code samples. For example, you may have here Terraform as another way that you can create Azure resources, or you may have a Pulumi or any other, or any other infrastructure as a code way to deal with the to create and define your cloud resources in Azure. So all these tools, they talk to Azure Resource Manager, which we call ARM, and then from ARM layer, it actually, get the resource providers where uh, your request to change, update, or create a resource are basically propagated to the Azure platform, and then they get generated. Now, you may also be skeptical to start to learn this new language, but let me give you more than 10 reasons why it's actually going to be beneficial for you to start learning Azure Bicep language. So first of all, uh, Bicep language comes with, it's easy to understand and maintain because it has much less learning curve when you compare that with ARM template or any other infrastructure as a code provisioning language. It comes with day zero support, meaning that whenever there is a change to Azure resources and their APIs, it's going to be reflected right away on Azure Bicep language because it's using those APIs to bring the API versioning and features from those APIs. Next, it's a transparent abstraction over ARM template, meaning that whatever you can do in Azure Bicep, it's actually um, also doable in ARM template, and all the features of ARM template you can have easy access and reuse with your Azure Bicep because Azure Bicep itself as a language get compiles into the ARM templates. Secondly, it comes with very great tooling from Visual Studio Code. It comes with extension called Azure Bicep extension, and I will show that during the demo on Visual Studio Code. It comes with clean code syntax, and it comes with code reuse where you can use modularity and encapsulate logic of your Azure resource creation for your project and reuse across the modules. There's a deep integration with Azure as well, which is kind of expected based on the understanding that Azure Bicep itself is created by Microsoft Azure team. And it comes with different features like pre-flight validation, where you can validate the before creation of the resource that your operation is going to be successful, or if there are some issues, you can get advanced notification. Uh, with Azure Bicep, you don't have to manage any state like you have to do with Terraforms, because the state itself is, you know, checking the state of your latest deployment is done by before deploying your code, and Azure knows, Azure infrastructure basically take care of that, take care of that uh, aspect of the state management. And finally, it comes with a production support, meaning that if you get into any issues while using Azure Bicep, you can always, get support from regular channels that Microsoft provides. So before diving into more, let's look at what is that Azure Bicep looks like. So I'm going to show you a bit, uh, an example where we have basically a declaration of Azure Bicep code. And before jumping here, if you want to see and have an access to this code, you can always, go and check the GitHub repo where everything is there. This is my GitHub repo, okay, that you can always access, and it's going to be in the reference links. So once you access that, just scroll down and find the Learn Bicep. This is the basically the repo from where I'm going to provide you examples, and it's going to be there so you can go and check. So you are more than welcome to put your PR if you have anything to add, and I'll be, gladly add you to this one. But this is the repo that you can go and check. In addition to that, you can also check some pipelines which are the part of this repo, and kind of get some understanding how to build automatically your Azure Bicep so it get deployed into your Azure environment. So again, Learn Bicep is going to be the repo that I recommend to go and check for this scenario. So I'm switching back here to the Visual Studio Code. As you see, we are targeting subscription scope, and then we define certain parameters. We have some rules here, making sure that the length of this resource group is constrained. And this is something that you may know that when you create a resource in Azure Bicep, there are certain restrictions on naming conventions, so you can enforce them. In addition to that, you can have a list of allowed values that you wanna your parameters to be picked through. In this case, as you see, I have a default value that's picking up the region, which is the US. And then the next step here, I'm creating a resource group, right? And I'm giving the name that's get compiled from resource group bicep demo. And I attach some tags here. And finally, I create a storage account here. I'm relying on a module. So it's a modularity is actually this example where it goes to the modules and pulls up the storage param bicep. Again, this is going to be here, storage param bicep. So it's going to be here. So it's pulling up this file as a parameter, and then it's basically going to utilize this module when we are basically building this storage account. So if you want to see how it will look like or what are the resources, there's a nice feature called Azure Bicep Visualizer. It's over here on the left side. Once you install the Azure Bicep extension, you should be able to see that. How you would know if you have your Azure Bicep extension? First of all, you will get these icons. Secondly, here, if you go to the extensions and type bicep, you should be able to see this bicep extension. So I highly recommend to install that if you didn't install that yet. So once it's there, you should be able to see all those features. So let's look at this. Click on this bicep extension here for visualization. We are going to click on this bicep visualizer. And then here on the left side, we get some understanding what's going to be created. So basically, it's going to create a resource group, and then it will create a storage account which will have a lock in it. So this is what we'll get out of this deployment. And this is a good way to look and understand the bicep files. On the other side, if you are familiar with Azure Bicep code or ARM templates, you can always go and right click and say, okay, go and build ARM template from this bicep file. And then you will see that on right there in the same folder, we will get a ARM template created called with .json extension, and then this is going to be representation um, of that ARM template in JSON, so that this is the how it will look like if you use the if you build an ARM template out of this bicep. So it will give some metadata, it will define the parameters that are here. Of course, it will define the resources, which is the resource group. Then it defines the deployment for that resource group, where it actually deploys from the module. It's going to deploy it another file, which is going to be your basically storage account, which comes with its own parameter and all the settings that we have in place. So I'm going to close this file for now. It was a small demo to see what's the Azure Bicep, how it's related to ARM template, and how you can navigate and utilize the modularity. Now, if you continue with the demo, next step is how you can, install the Azure Bicep and get started. So to do that, you can check the awesome Azure Bicep repo. It has a good article about how to install that on a Windows, Mac, or Linux. And there are steps to install that. Please check this. And just if you want to, let me give you a little bit sneak peek preview to that. So if you go back to the to my repo here to GitHub, you would see that there's also Azure Bicep, which is very popular repo here. And you would see here if you want to, for example, install using the Azure CLI, you would have this, good article that will show you how to install using PowerShell or Azure CLI, and then these are the links to the to actual installation guide, where you can use them to complete installation of this Azure Bicep on your environment. So let me go back here. Next here, let's look into a small evolution how this Azure Bicep actually get take off. So initially started with the alpha version, and it started in August 28, 2020. And then over time, there were new versions added, but it didn't reach the stable version 1.0 yet. At this moment, its latest version, when you install, you would set it 0.29, and expected version, solid version 1.0 is actually expected to come pretty soon, but there are certain features that Azure Bicep team wants to finish before offering this 1.0 version, and we'll look into those features and what's expected to come in our next slides. But keep in mind, even if you go and install the current version of Azure Bicep or any version that's greater than 0.3, you can always expect Microsoft support. You can always expect any issues to be resolved by Microsoft support team, because they do support Azure Bicep. And if you get into any, let's say, situations where you need the support, you can always get that for your projects. So let's look at what are the recent Azure Bicep releases and in last few months, and what were the things that get released. First of all, we had this compile time imports, and we had these user-defined functions. So for the first one, which is compile time imports, in Azure Bicep, you can have these compile time imports that are feature that are going to allow the users to export resources such as functions or variables for use in other Bicep files. This feature is accessible through use of the expert keyword, which is a decorator, and the import statement that comes with it. Next thing is the user-defined functions. With user-defined functions, it's available for you in Bicep files, and user-defined functions are separate from the standard Bicep functions that are automatically available within your Bicep file. You can create your own functions when you have a complicated expressions that are used repeatedly in your Bicep files. Next, here we have allow functions imports in Bicep param files that get implemented. Then you also have these linting rules that you can define in your bicep config file, which I'm going to show where it is and how you can utilize that. And we have this Microsoft Graph extensibility, which became public, which is on the public preview at the moment. And of course, there are certain breaking changes because this language is still getting to evolution, and sometimes there are replacement of certain phrases, certain certain, I wouldn't say it's phrases, but certain functionality names are changed because Microsoft Azure Bicep team wants to use standardization when you compare this language with other compatible implementations that are already in the market. And one of them was to replace provider with extensions because that better suits the purpose of that feature. And finally, there's export as Bicep feature on Azure Portal that's coming in a very few weeks. Maybe it's going to be available next week, which means that using the Azure Portal, you are not going to have only the option to export the existing uh, infrastructure as a code representation of your Azure resources into, export them into ARM template, but you will also have an option to export them into Azure Bicep files. And more than that, there's also work to make sure that you can export them into Terraform files as well. So this is a new development, and it's one of the big things that's coming very soon. In terms of upcoming Bicep releases, what to expect in next couple of weeks or months is that there will be this local deploy feature is going one of the most important ones that's going on at the moment. There are new documentation that's getting generated for these new features like user-defined functions, imports, how you can import the code. That's all under the Microsoft Learn Passes. Then another feature that's going to be get complete before the stable version 1.0 is pass resources between modules. Then we have a work that's going on completing the private registry implementation. As you know, private registry is already there, and you can use that feature if you wanna as a company or organization have tighter control over the modules or assets that your development team created so that you can utilize them in more secure way. There's also dynamic type updates that are going to be added. And finally, Bicep Deploy is another feature that's expected to be, done by and completed by Microsoft Azure Bicep team before releasing the final version 1.0. That said, let's look at one of the very exciting features called enabling Graph APIs with Bicep or Microsoft Graph extensions. So as you see in this diagram, uh, when we enable the ARM or Bicep templates to be able to use the Graph APIs, it opens a set of new functionalities where you can use the well-known Microsoft Graph tooling to go and basically query the resources and use that as an extensible resource within your Azure environment. In addition to that, the new thing that was added is the Graph Bicep extension with dynamic types. On the left side, as you see, there's a bicep config file that has which you need to basically enable certain experimental features. And once you enable that on the left, then you can use that as it's defined on the example bicep file on the right side. So you can define your test group, which is going to be a resource, for example, here that defines the Microsoft Graph groups, and then you define the parameters in order to be able to access that. So before going further, let me mention these experimental features and how you can actually access them. So if you switch to Visual Studio Code, you will see that here I'm going to basically collapse this folder and go to the settings here on the right side. So we are going to click on it, and then in the settings you would see that you have another setting here that we are going to click. So let's do that. And at that point you would get this basically uh, you'll get the settings panel here that when you type a bicep, you would have a separate extensions place where you would be able to see the bicep features. So as you see, all these are experimental features. So you have this option to enable or disable them if you wanna use them. For example, one of the features is enabling the surveys. So if you are okay to give feedback and you want to enable them, then you can go and enable them. So it's going to be automatically enabled for you. And there are some other like decompile on the paste. If you are pasting, for example, JSON values and you want them to be decompiled to bicep representation, that's another thing that's there. Okay, that said, again, you are welcome to add or remove your desired functionality here. Next thing here, I want to, as we mentioned already during this small demo, you can really get benefit of Visualizer, which is version 2.0 and always get updated on Azure Bicep extension. So I'm going to show you one of the examples here. For example, if you go to the samples here, and I'm going to navigate to the 7 deploy modules, this parameter. So this file is basically deploys a resource group and then a number of resources under it. But if you don't have much time to read that, you can always come and look at visualization. For example, I'm going to use again Bicep Visualizer here on the right corner, right top corner. I'll click on it, and then uh, in few seconds I'll get this nice visualization on what to expect. So as I see from here, I'm going to expect uh, 4 resource groups to be created. One of them is going to create a Windows virtual machine. Another one will deploy the Cosmos DB. Another one will deploy all the storage modules, and then I'll have a web app deployment as well. So having this visualizer feature is really helpful just to visualize, and it's going to interpret your infrastructure as a code and display that these nice icons that are Azure resources here. But of course, it's not a deployment, it's just a representation of your infrastructure as a code that you wrote as a Azure Bicep. That said, let's look at, if you have any questions, please put them into the comments again that of the video that you are going to watch. But let's have a small recap in terms of what we covered today, and hopefully you learned something new today from this session. First of all, we start with Express Intro into Azure Bicep. We differentiate between Azure Bicep as infrastructure as a code, how it is related to the ARM template, and other infrastructure as a code languages and tools. Then we look what's the latest on Azure Bicep that happened in the last few months, and we looked into the next release in Azure Bicep, what to expect before 1.0 version is going to be released. And after looking at all of them and what to expect in the future, we had a couple of demos in between. So let me go. Before finalizing this session, I want to also share these QCR codes. If you are watching this on your mobile device, you can always scan this. So here you have Learn Bicep GitHub, the repo from where I showed the demos. You have this again QCR code for the Azure Bicep First Look course to get started learning them as a video. Then you have part 1 and part 2. Then you have this Azure Bicep project, which is basically Microsoft Azure Bicep project that you can utilize, and you have awesome Azure Bicep repo that you can utilize as well. And before going further, I want to show the official Azure Bicep project. This is where you can find it. And as you see here, there are a number of releases that happen every month. So the latest release at the moment is V 0.29. And on the next release, we expect a new change in Azure Portal, a possibility to export your Azure resource into a Bicep file, like you do currently have possibility to do that export into Azure ARM templates. Okay, that's it. I want to say big thank you for your time, being able to watch this session. I hope you learned something new and you know what to expect from Azure Bicep. I want to say big thank you to the Azure Back to School organizers. This is a great event, and here's the links that you can go and check. So if you have any questions, again, I'm here to assist you, or try to get connected with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter X, and just put their questions there. What interests you in Azure Bicep, what you are trying to learn, and where you are as a developer, DevOps engineer, or a beginner in your journey of infrastructure as a code. uh, Please let me know. Thank you everyone for your attention. Have a great day, and bye for now.